They said these were rumors, whispers from the shadows. But inside declassified documents and forgotten military labs lie experiments that were never meant to see the light of day, projects that reached into the limits of time, consciousness, and reality itself. Tonight, we open 10 files the governments of the world tried to erase. Welcome to Archive 9. On the far eastern edge of Long Island stands a relic of the Cold War, a fortress of concrete and steel known as Camp Hero. Officially, it was just another coastal defense station, abandoned after World War II. But after midnight, locals swear they saw the radar dish turning long after the base was supposedly shut down. They say it wasn't scanning the sky, it was probing time. In 1971, an unmarked branch of the Air Force quietly took control of the site under the name Project Montauk. The public cover described radar frequency calibration, but declassified budget entries show something unusual: sustained power consumption equivalent to a small city and requisitions for biological amplifiers. Those two words appear nowhere else in military archives. What exactly was Montauk trying to amplify? Whistleblowers decades later spoke of a research division focused on temporal field displacement, based on theories once drafted by Nikola Tesla and recovered from his New York apartment after his death. Tesla had written that if energy could be oscillated at the Earth's resonant frequency, it might bend the linear path of duration. The Montauk engineers wanted to prove it. They built a transmitter capable of broadcasting pulses measured in terawatts, synchronizing electromagnetic harmonics with the planet's Schumann resonance, 7.883 hertz. When activated, the air shimmered. Instruments failed. One technician described seeing the room stretch like a reflection rippling in water. Then came August 12, 1983, the night that supposedly broke reality. Former radio engineer Preston Nichols claimed that during a full-power test, the system locked onto something, not another frequency, but another moment. Monitors displayed impossible readings, identical time signatures from 1943, matching the coordinates of the USS Eldridge, the ship from the infamous Philadelphia experiment. For a few seconds, two eras overlapped. Men screamed, power surged, and then everything went black. Nichols and others swore that something came through the vortex, a presence, neither fully seen nor measurable. In his accounts, it took the shape of a massive shadow before dissolving into the air. Camp Hero was evacuated that night, every record erased. In 1984, the surrounding area was suddenly fenced off, the base officially decommissioned. Yet for years, residents of Montauk reported strange pulses on their televisions every August, bursts of static repeating at perfect 12-second intervals. Skeptics dismiss it as fantasy. They point out that none of the alleged witnesses could provide verifiable documents, but fragments of truth remain. The radar dish is real, still locked facing north. The site still draws unexplained electrical current from the state grid. And in 1992, a Freedom of Information request uncovered a single surviving reference: Project Phoenix 2, terminated due to uncontrolled temporal feedback. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was something far beyond human understanding. An attempt to step outside time that tore open more than the scientists could control. The files are closed, the tunnels sealed. But when you stand beneath that rusting radar, you can feel it, a low hum, buried beneath the wind. And sometimes, when the storm rolls in from the Atlantic, the dish still moves. In 1972, deep inside a small research lab at Stanford, two men sat in absolute silence. One held a sealed envelope containing a random photograph. The other, a quiet, nervous artist named Ingo Swann, closed his eyes and began to draw. Minutes later, his hand trembled across the paper, sketching a perfect image of the target, a snow-covered radar dome in Alaska. He had never seen it before. The envelope had never been opened. That moment was logged as the first successful remote viewing session in recorded intelligence history. The experiment caught the CIA's attention. Within months, funding arrived under a new code name, Stargate. The goal, to weaponize the human mind. During the Cold War, both the US and Soviet Union were desperate to outthink and outsee each other. Intelligence suggested the Soviets had psychics trained to locate submarines and missile silos. America refused to be left behind. So in a windowless building at Fort Meade, Maryland, a small unit of viewers began their classified work. They weren't soldiers. They were artists, engineers, linguists, ordinary people with one extraordinary ability: the claim to see what eyes could not. Each session followed the same pattern: a coordinate, a blank sheet, a deep breath, and then the voice of the monitor. Describe the target. One described a cylindrical metal object in orbit, days before satellite photos confirmed the launch of a new Soviet spy satellite. Another drew a desert facility with curved roofs and pipelines, later matching photographs of a Libyan chemical plant. But not all targets were earthly. Ingo Swann was once given a number sequence, told nothing else. His report: a barren landscape, red dust, pyramidal structures, beings in suspended animation. The coordinates, later revealed, pointed to Mars. A 1984 CIA memo classified it as perceptual extension anomaly. As the years went on, the project expanded. Over 20 years, from 1972 to 1995, the Stargate program collected thousands of sessions. Some were nonsense. Some were impossible to explain. Declassified pages show analysts struggling to categorize the data. Hits statistically significant, but methodologically unstable. Translation: it worked, sometimes, and no one knew why. By the early 90s, as budgets tightened and the Cold War ended, the CIA tried to bury the project. In 1995, an internal review concluded no actionable intelligence obtained. Stargate was shut down. But among the redacted lines of that report lies one phrase: unedited. Viewer perceived observers on the other side. Even after closure, several of the remote viewers reported recurring dreams of being watched during sessions. They described faint whispers in their headphones. Coordinates whispered back to them. Skeptics dismiss it all as coincidence, psychology, or self-delusion, but decades later, fragments of the data remain accurate. Coordinates, symbols, and structures that didn't exist on maps at the time. When asked if he believed he had truly seen beyond distance, Swann once replied, "I don't know if I was seeing the world, or if the world was showing itself to me. Nak nen cham dan, tieng tan so radio gyam tan. Kon lai tiang boot via trengiai." The mind is the oldest frontier and the most dangerous one to cross. If consciousness can travel beyond space, what's to stop it from looking back? The story of MK Ultra doesn't begin with science, it begins with fear. In the 1950s, after the Korean War, American soldiers returned home with something their generals couldn't explain: memories rewritten. Prisoners of war confessed to crimes they never committed. They praised their captors, rejected their own country. The CIA called it brainwashing. And if enemies could control minds, then America needed to learn how. Under the directive of director Alan Dulles, a network of laboratories came alive in secret. The name was sterile, bureaucratic, Project MK Ultra, but its mission was anything but. They sought the architecture of thought itself. Over 80 institutions, universities, hospitals, and private clinics became quiet partners. Many didn't even know who was paying their bills. Doctors were told the research was for behavioral psychology. In truth, the experiments aimed to rewrite the human will. The tool was a new compound synthesized from ergot fungus, LSD-25. To some, it was a hallucinogen. To the CIA, it was a weapon. Agents dosed soldiers without consent, spiked drinks in bars, slipped vials into the coffee of their own staff. In San Francisco, a front operation called Safe House tested prostitutes and addicts, filming their reactions through one-way mirrors. The rooms were lined with microphones, the bed sheets with hidden wires. They wanted to see how far a person's identity could fracture before it broke. In hospitals across the country, patients seeking therapy were hypnotized, shocked, deprived of sleep, and injected with unknown chemicals. One case, Dr. Ewan Cameron at McGill University, became infamous. His psychic driving sessions kept patients in induced comas for weeks, repeating recorded messages thousands of times. When they woke, they remembered nothing, not even their own families. Among the destroyed files, one memo survived. It described the program's ultimate goal: to induce a state in which an individual will perform acts against his own moral code, while believing it to be of his own free will. By the 1970s, fragments of MK Ultra surfaced through Senate hearings. Victims came forward. The public was horrified. But over 20,000 documents had already been shredded. Only 7 boxes remained, saved by accident in a financial archive. Those pages revealed code names: Artichoke, Bluebird, Monarch, each a different chapter in the same pursuit: total control of the human mind. When questioned, CIA officers claimed the program was abandoned in 1963, but testimony from insiders suggested otherwise. Funding reappeared under sub-projects connected to defense contractors. One scientist described being paid to test memory implants through electromagnetic pulses. His name vanished from payroll records the next month. Decades later, journalists discovered references to an extended behavioral influence study in the 1980s, signed with a familiar designation: MK Search. Maybe MK Ultra never ended. Maybe it simply changed its name. They tried to erase memory. Instead, they left behind ghosts, fragments of lives rewritten by science in the name of defense. The question isn't whether they succeeded. It's whether they ever stopped trying. When the war ended in 1945, the world believed the nightmare was over. But in the ashes of Nazi Germany, the United States saw not monsters, but opportunity. They called it Operation Paperclip, a simple bureaucratic name hiding one of the most controversial missions in modern history. The goal was clear: extract the brightest minds of the defeated Reich before the Soviets did. Scientists who once designed weapons for Hitler were quietly offered new homes in America. Over 1,600 men were selected. Many were members of the Nazi Party. Some had overseen human experiments in concentration camps. Yet their war records were altered, their crimes erased. Each dossier carried a paperclip, the mark of clearance. Among them was Werner von Braun, once an SS officer, now celebrated as the father of the American space program. His V-2 rockets had rained death on London. But in 1946, those same blueprints became the foundation for NASA's Saturn rockets, the engines that would one day carry mankind to the moon. The irony was almost unbearable. The technology that had destroyed cities would now send humanity among the stars. But not all scientists went to NASA. Many were absorbed into the U.S. Army's Chemical Corps, the CIA, and later Fort Detrick, the birthplace of biological warfare research. There, under new American code names, they continued studies once conducted in concentration camps, testing hypothermia, oxygen deprivation, nerve agents, all in the name of national security. Documents declassified decades later revealed chilling language. Subject survivability under extreme duress, physiological limits of reanimation, sensory deprivation thresholds. These weren't theoretical models. They were experiments on soldiers, on prisoners, on volunteers who never truly volunteered. The project's defenders argued that their work was scientific necessity. They said, if we don't use this knowledge, it will be lost. But knowledge built on suffering is never lost. It lingers. It stains everything it touches. By the 1950s, Operation Paperclip scientists had infiltrated almost every major U.S. defense and aerospace program. The Cold War had turned ethics into a luxury. America's race for superiority meant no secret was too dark, no collaborator too shameful. Publicly, the nation celebrated progress. Rockets, medicine, intelligence. Privately, it had inherited the ghosts of the Reich. In 1977, a reporter discovered a memo referring to a biomedical continuity program. It listed names, some already dead, others now working at research universities. The memo ended with a single sentence: history is written by the victors, data by the survivors. They say Paperclip helped America reach the moon. Maybe it did, but it also proved something darker, that progress can rise from atrocity, and sometimes the line between science and sin is drawn in pencil. We looked to the stars with hands that weren't clean. In the late 1940s, deep beneath Moscow, the Soviet Union built an underground facility known only as Laboratory 418. Officially, it was a high-altitude physiology center. But the documents, what little survived, tell a different story, a story about sleep, or rather the deliberate destruction of it. After the war, Stalin's scientists became obsessed with the idea of creating soldiers who never needed rest, perfect machines of endurance. They believed sleep was weakness, and in 1949, a classified order was signed, prolonged wakefulness trials on political prisoners. 5 men were selected. None of them volunteered. They were sealed inside a chamber. Steel walls, no windows, only a two-way microphone, and a narrow tube delivering a new experimental gas. It was said to be an oxygen stimulant developed to keep pilots awake. In reality, it was an untested compound known as NIC-32, designed to suppress the brain's delta waves, the rhythm of sleep itself. For the first 3 days, everything seemed fine. Subjects talked, ate, laughed nervously. But by day 5, paranoia set in. Whispers turned into shouting. By day 9, they stopped speaking to each other, choosing instead to mutter into the microphones. The words were incoherent, but repeated the same phrase again and again. The watchers are listening. Researchers noted elevated heart rates, blood pressure beyond safe levels, and violent emotional outbursts. When they tried to sedate one subject through the gas line, He tore his own skin open to stay awake. By day 12, one man died from exhaustion. Another simply stopped moving, still standing, eyes open. The others began mutilating themselves, claiming they could hear voices beneath the floor. Then the feed went silent. When guards entered the chamber on day 15, they found 4 men still alive, or something close to it. Their eyes were wide, blackened, their skin torn. They begged to remain awake. One screamed, "We are what you left inside when you dream." The surviving records end there. The lab's coordinates were erased, the chamber sealed. But in 1992, a retired Russian biologist named Dr. Anton Kirov claimed to have seen fragments of the original data. He described EEG readings that showed no delta, no REM, no alpha, just a flat wave of electrical noise. Technically, he said, they were awake, but the brain was no longer human. Skeptics dismissed the story as Cold War folklore, a horror born from propaganda. Yet the Soviet archives contain a file labeled 418D, marked medical anomaly, no replication advised. And in 2003, urban explorers discovered a sealed door beneath an abandoned research institute outside Moscow. On it, faint words etched in Russian, "Do not open while sleeping." They tried to eliminate sleep, the one sanctuary the mind cannot live without. But perhaps in doing so, they awakened something else. After all, if dreams connect us to the unconscious, what happens when you tear that bridge down? In 1971, inside the Maimonides Medical Center in Brooklyn, 2 sleeping subjects were connected to a maze of wires, electrodes tracing every flicker of their dreams. One of them was shown a picture moments before falling asleep. A key, a spiral, a running horse. The other, in a separate room, was told to record whatever images appeared in his dreams. Hours later, his notes described a metal key turning, a spinning tunnel, and a galloping shape. That single experiment birthed one of the strangest government-backed studies in modern psychology, the dream telepathy program. During the Cold War, while the CIA explored mind control and remote viewing, a quieter division turned to something subtler, the shared unconscious. The theory was simple and terrifying. If the human mind could send and receive signals while awake, could it also communicate while dreaming? The team, led by Dr. Stanley Krippner and Dr. Montague Ullman, began a series of controlled tests over several years. Each night, senders were exposed to random visual stimuli, geometric patterns, abstract art, sometimes emotional photographs from war archives. Receivers slept under observation. When they entered REM sleep, the moment when the brain mirrors waking consciousness, the senders were instructed to transmit. Results were inconsistent, but patterns emerged. Receivers reported matching details far beyond chance, not just shapes, but feelings. Sadness of a crowd, flashing lights, the taste of salt air. One even described a painting he had never seen, Edvard Munch's The Scream, while his sender stared at it in another room. The CIA took notice. In 1973, funding quietly appeared under the label Psychological Defense Research. The project expanded to include military volunteers and isolated dream labs with Faraday shielding to block all known electromagnetic interference. But that's when the anomalies began. Subjects started to complain of residual dreams, visions that weren't part of the experiment. They saw strangers' faces, unknown places, and in one chilling report, the same dark figure standing between the sender and receiver. It didn't move. It only watched. When technicians reviewed EEG data, they found something impossible. Both subjects' brainwaves syncing perfectly for 6 full minutes, two sleeping minds beating in unison. After that night, one subject refused to sleep again. In the final memo before the program's quiet termination in 1976, Krippner wrote, "Dreams may not be contained within the individual. They may be the shared software of consciousness." The files were sealed under the Defense Technical Information Center. When declassified decades later, hundreds of pages were missing, replaced with a single note: "Project suspended due to unknown psychological interference." Skeptics claim coincidence, flawed statistics, human imagination. But what if dreams are not private at all, merely channels tuned to different frequencies of the same broadcast? Every night, billions of us fall asleep, disconnected, or so we think. But maybe somewhere between waking and the void, we are all still talking to each other. The only question is, who else might be listening? Before the world knew the name MK Ultra, there was another, a quieter project, a darker beginning. It was called Project Bluebird. Born in 1950, 3 years before MK Ultra, Bluebird was the Central Intelligence Agency's first attempt to weaponize the human mind. Its purpose was not to study consciousness, but to control it. At the dawn of the Cold War, paranoia shaped every decision in Washington. Soviet agents were everywhere. American prisoners in Korea had been turned, confessing to false crimes, praising the enemy. The CIA believed the human brain could be rewritten, and that someone else had already discovered how. So they built Bluebird, an experimental program to explore the boundaries of memory, obedience, and identity. The records that survived describe three objectives: to prevent unauthorized extraction of information from agents, to condition individuals to resist interrogation, to create, through hypnosis and drugs, a second personality capable of actions the primary self would not remember. It sounds like fiction until you read the testimonies. Subjects were recruited from hospitals, prisons, and military bases. Some volunteered for what they were told was psychological resilience training. Others were not told anything at all. They were injected with sodium pentothal, truth serum, then hypnotized for hours. When they awoke, they remembered nothing. In one test, a woman was hypnotized and instructed that upon hearing a certain phrase, she would deliver a sealed envelope to a stranger. The next day, she did exactly that, with no memory of it afterward. The CIA called it Manchurian conditioning. Doctors noted that after repeated sessions, subjects developed dissociative states, fragmented personalities, each with its own memories, voices, even handwriting. A document dated 1951 described the results as functional compartmentalization of the psyche. Bluebird soon evolved into a successor, Artichoke. The new project combined hypnosis, isolation, sleep deprivation, and a growing library of chemical agents. The question they asked was chilling. Can we control an individual to perform acts of our choosing against his moral code and remember nothing afterward? In one declassified memo, an agent described a field test. Subject instructed under hypnosis to fire weapon at target X. Refused consciously. Upon reinduction in Q word, subject complied. Post-session amnesia successful. We don't know the name of that subject. We only know he never returned to the base. Bluebird was officially terminated in 1951, rebranded as Artichoke, and later reborn as MK Ultra. But its foundation, the idea that a person could be split, rewritten, and used like a tool, survived. Many psychologists now believe the program's legacy lingers in trauma patients who display unexplained memory fractures and altered states decades later. Some of them, when hypnotized, speak in military code. Skeptics argue coincidence. Historians call it Cold War hysteria. But one unredacted page from 1950 contains a single handwritten note. Every human is a locked room. Bluebird taught us how to find the key. They said Bluebird was meant to defend the free world. Maybe it did, but it also revealed a truth few wanted to face, that the most dangerous battlefield isn't the mind of the enemy, it's your own. In 1962, inside a hidden wing of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, a new kind of experiment began. The Cold War had moved beyond Earth's surface, into orbit, and the U.S. Air Force wanted to know how far a human mind could stretch before it broke. They called it Project Montauk, but later files referred to it simply as the Human Zero-G Chamber. The chamber itself was a masterpiece of engineering, a sealed, magnetically suspended capsule designed to simulate true weightlessness. No gravity, no sound, no light. Inside, a volunteer would float for hours, sometimes days, monitored only by voice link and biometric sensors. At first, the tests seemed routine. Subjects described dizziness, disorientation, a feeling of falling forever. But after 12 hours, strange things began to happen. One subject reported hearing whispers in the static. Another saw brief flashes of light that formed shapes, faces, maps, symbols. In one log entry, the supervising physician wrote, "Subject 7 requests termination, states he feels watched from outside the capsule, though cameras show nothing present." The Air Force blamed sensory deprivation, yet internal memos show growing concern that something more profound was occurring. Not hallucination, but perception. Brain scans revealed synchronized spikes across both hemispheres, a pattern scientists compared to deep meditative states described in Tibetan monks. Only these men were not meditating. They were trapped in silence. After 36 hours, one subject claimed he could see his own body from above. His heart rate remained steady while EEG readings flatlined. Neither awake nor unconscious. The lead scientist wrote in the margin, "Possible separation event?" By the fourth trial, they increased exposure to 72 hours. When they opened the chamber, the subject was still breathing, eyes open, but he could not speak. For several minutes, his pupils reacted to light in delayed rhythm, as if responding from a distance. When asked what he experienced, he finally whispered, "You don't fall into space, it falls into you." After that, the experiment stopped abruptly. Officially, the reason was budgetary reallocation. Unofficially, an internal report concluded, extended zero gravity induces loss of spatial identity. Subjects perceive continuity with external environment. Terminate for psychological safety. Years later, a technician who worked the night shift confessed that after each test, they found faint electromagnetic fluctuations lingering in the chamber, frequencies that matched human brainwaves. Though the room was empty, he swore that sometimes the sensors still triggered, as if someone were inside. Skeptics call it nonsense, a combination of isolation and imagination. But the data remains locked under FOC file 447Z, classified unreleased. The chamber itself was dismantled in 1965, the parts distributed to research facilities across the country. Only one component was never accounted for, the central magnetic core. Its tracking label reads, returned to manufacturer. The manufacturer had gone out of business 5 years earlier. Amnen hashong, chikontieng hiptim, roy imbat, motkwanglang dai. They set out to study how the body adapts to zero gravity. Instead, they discovered how fragile the boundary is between the self and the void. Because when there's no up or down, no weight, no sound, the first thing you lose isn't gravity. It's a sense of being someone at all. By 2004, military science had already mastered surveillance, drones, and orbiting weapons. But deep beneath Groom Lake, in the Nevada desert, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, pursued something the public had never heard of: spatial resonance engineering. The experiment was officially labeled Project Q Rift, later redacted to a simpler phrase found in internal logs: the dimensional room. It began with an anomaly. In 1998, physicists studying quantum lattice vibrations at Los Alamos noticed a brief negative energy signature, an implosion of measurable space lasting less than 1/1000th of a second. DARPA saw potential. If space could collapse even briefly, maybe it could be bent, folded, or breached. So a chamber was built, a perfectly spherical room, 12 meters wide, lined with superconductive coils cooled by liquid helium. When activated, these coils generated overlapping electromagnetic fields designed to simulate zero-point resonance, the lowest possible energy of space-time itself. The scientists called it tickling the fabric. During the first activation, nothing happened. During the second, sensors detected a 0.04% loss of internal volume. Space, the empty air inside, had shrunk. The fourth test lasted 13 seconds. All video feeds failed. Acoustic sensors recorded a deafening pulse that registered simultaneously across 3 frequencies: 7 Hz, 33 Hz, and 528 Hz, identical to human brain resonance, Earth's Schumann frequency, and DNA's molecular vibration. 3 harmonics, 1 moment, then silence. The report labeled it localized spatial inversion. But one technician wrote in the margin, space folded inward, light bent wrong way, one observer missing. That observer was Dr. Leonard F. Rains, a field physicist who'd been monitoring the chamber's magnetic output. When systems rebooted, his chair was empty. No heat trace, no DNA residue. His badge was later found fused into the steel floor, half embedded, half intact. In the aftermath, DARPA sealed the room, flooding it with concrete. The official explanation: containment of helium leak. But internal communications retrieved years later under the Freedom of Information Act tell another story. An email chain from August 3, 2004 reads, "Do not attempt further resonance at harmonic 3. Feedback predicted at 2.6 seconds. Dimensional ratio unstable." One engineer responded, "Then what did we open?" No answer was sent. In 2011, a civilian contractor repairing power lines near the old test site reported that his radio picked up a signal at exactly 33 Hz. The transmission lasted 21 seconds and contained only one line of text in Morse code, "Still inside." Skeptics claim it was a hoax, but physicists who reviewed the DARPA fragments admit the math checks out. Space can, in theory, curve so tightly that it touches itself. And if that ever happens, whatever's inside doesn't disappear. It repeats. They built a machine to look between the folds of reality. But maybe the folds looked back. Because if space can echo, then somewhere in the silence, something might still be answering. In the summer of 1987, a small team of physicists gathered in a bunker outside Los Alamos, New Mexico. Their goal was simple on paper: to measure how sound frequencies could interact with solid matter. They called it the resonance test. But according to the surviving documents, that's not what really happened. The experiment was funded by a joint military academic grant, quietly labeled Structural Harmonics Field Applications. The head scientist, Dr. Miriam Kessler, believed every object, even space itself, had a resonant frequency. Strike that note precisely, and matter might behave like liquid. In her personal notebook, later retrieved from the site, she wrote, "If frequency can break glass, perhaps the universe can break too." The team built a chamber lined with crystalline baffles to contain harmonic waves. Inside, a magnetic transducer emitted tones that increased in microintervals, each one measured down to the thousandth of a hertz. At low levels, the wall simply vibrated, but near 428.17 hertz, something began to change. Air density readings fluctuated. Lasers aimed through the chamber bent slightly, as though refracted by heat, except the temperature never rose. Then the light inside began to fold. A technician described it as a ripple, like a curtain underwater. The oscilloscope went wild, showing mirror signals out of phase, echoes of frequencies that hadn't yet been played. Time seemed to stutter. Kessler shouted for them to stop, but the system had already reached harmonic lock. Witnesses described a flash of white so bright it left after images burned into their vision. When the light faded, a shape hovered mid-air, a sphere of transparent distortion, pulsing in rhythm with the tone. It hummed like a human voice caught between breath and scream. Every metal surface around it magnetized. And then the resonance collapsed. The chamber imploded inward, not exploded, but folded, as though space itself had been pinched between fingers. Power failed. Instruments fused. When emergency teams arrived, they found no sign of Kessler or her assistants. Only the transducer remained, humming faintly in a tone too low to hear. The official report blamed mechanical feedback, but buried in the appendices was a single equation, handwritten and circled: dr fxlx ne1t. Underneath it, Kessler had scrawled 3 words: "It wasn't sound." Weeks later, local geologists recorded unexplained microtremors beneath the site, 12 seconds long, repeating at exact intervals, as if echoing from beneath the ground. When the data was mapped, the waveform formed a perfect spiral, identical to the harmonic pattern of the resonance test. The site was sealed in 1988. The report was declassified in 2014, but pages 12 through 29 are missing. What remains ends mid-sentence: "We have not contained the frequency. It is still." They set out to make matter sing. But maybe the song was older than we were, waiting for someone to strike the first note. Because if space can be torn by sound, then the universe isn't silent. It's just waiting for the right frequency to answer. 10 experiments, 10 fragments of a truth no one was meant to see. They began as scientific ambitions to test the limits of thought, time, space, and the human mind. But every one of them crossed a boundary that was never meant to be crossed. Each time humanity tried to push beyond its cage, something on the other side looked back. The men who ran these projects believed they were serving progress. Some claimed patriotism, others said survival. But in the quiet hours when the lights dimmed and the data flickered into silence, I wonder if they understood what they'd done. not to the world, but to themselves. We call them experiments, but maybe they were invitations. Every portal opened, every dream breached, every mind rewritten, all whispering the same warning. Knowledge without wisdom is not light. It's fire. We built machines to bend reality, to decode thought, to tear the veil of sleep and space, and yet we never stop to ask the simplest question, should we? History buries the evidence, seals the chambers, redacts the files. But the echoes remain, in the hum of old frequencies, in the gaps between our dreams, in the places where science and superstition shake hands and refuse to let go. Some say the past is gone, but if time can fold, if consciousness can cross, if reality itself can be tuned like a string, then maybe these experiments never ended. Maybe they're still running, somewhere between what we know and what we fear. Because truth isn't buried, it waits. In forgotten rooms, behind sealed doors, under miles of redacted ink, humming softly at a frequency just beyond hearing. This is Archive 9, where the facts end and the evidence begins to breathe.